Hey everybody, Randy Patterson here, and I have such a fun interview for you this time around. I hope all of them are fun, but this is especially fun, and it is with Jimmy Vivino. You may recognize him from all of his years as being the band leader for the show band for Conan. And wow, what a legacy that was. And plus, he has played with so many different people. And this year, he is going on the road for a few select dates with comedian Bill Murray, who also has a band, who happens to have Mike Zito and Albert Castiglia, who we know through our interviews here on Boomerocity. So you're in for a super good treat. He's got lots of stories. I just let him roll with it because it was just fun listening to him. Amazing album that you're gonna love if you. We were talking about it, of course. That was the purpose of the call. And the name of the album you see here, but it's called "Gonna Be Two of Those Days." And Matt, he's got, in addition to his own band, he's got Joe Bonamassa on a tune and the legendary John Sebastian on two of the tunes. So get the album, please buy it. Don't just stream it, but buy it. Support our musicians that we know and love. That's how they make a living. So, and if you would, while you're listening to this, as always, I ask that you hit like. And if you're not already a subscriber, please subscribe. It's free of charge. I'm not going to charge you anything. And share it with your friends, especially blues lovers. So without any further ado, here is my first of what I hope are many more interviews to come with Jimmy Vivino. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerocity. Take care.
Unmute, start video.
I hear you, and now I see you.
Now we got it. It's too many. Anyway, I'm so technically challenged, you know.
Well,
we get some weird lighting. Hold it. A little better.
I see you just fine. You're lighting up good. So okay, where are you clicking in from?
Burbank, California. Where are you at?
I am in, to quote the Beatles, the Smoky Mountains way down south. I'm up in Sevierville, Tennessee.
Oh, well, that's like civilization compared to this Babylon that I'm in, you know.
You said you're where? You're in
Burbank, California.
Oh, Burbank. Oh, of course, with all the TV studios, all the work you done there. Yeah. Wow.
You know, when I landed here, I finally said, all right, I like the weather well enough, and I need a base that has a lot of airports so I can get out, you know. Yeah.
Wow. So you've how did the fires treat you there?
Well, luckily Burbank's like in a basin, you know, in a little valley, and
right.
We don't have many trees left here or brush or anything like that. It's like, you know, luckily it didn't. It could have, if the winds got bad enough, though. It could have come and hit us, you know.
Yeah.
We were just fortunate because not too far away, like Altadena was leveled and unbelievably, and then the whole coast. It was just tragic. It's just, you know, we're not in charge, man. You know,
we really aren't. You know, we had a big fire here, not to get off on my life, but about 7 or 8 years ago, we had a massive fire here, and it got within 0.4 of a mile of me. And it was scary. It was very scary. So, man, when I saw what was going on there, anywhere that I see that are fighting fires, I mean, there's a biggie going on the other side of the mountains from me here in North and South Carolina. It's you know, you're right. We're not in charge, man.
There's a great writer named Sarah Vowell. She's a historian. Great person too. And she used to say, don't worry about walking around the corner and somebody mugging you or killing you or anything. Nature will murder you. You know, I mean, the truth is, true. The Earth's been turning itself inside out for years. Whether we, you know, with all due respect to climate change being a real issue, it's been an issue since the Earth formed. So, you know, it's part of the Earth's process is, you know, just starting over again, and whatever lives there. Too bad, you know.
That's right. Hey, we're getting a little bit of glare on you there. Is there? There you go. Perfect.
The
Right there.
sun. It's that sun. It's coming
Yeah.
through this morning.
Speaking of, we're not in charge. We just said that, and they
There
were
you
letting the
go.
sun was letting us know.
And nature says no.
Well, man, I'm excited to chat with you, Jimmy. People think I know everything about music because of everybody I get to talk to, but man, I'm always surprised. And when Mark Pucci, teed you up to me on there, I started looking at that. Crap, I've heard all this guy's stuff on all sorts of,
because we're probably the same age, and because we get to a place where we've been around a long time. We do have a lot. We do gather a lot, and we do, encounter a lot, and it's important to relate it. So I'm glad you're calling.
Oh, it's my pleasure, man, and it's music is such a unifier, and I see it manifest in a lot of different ways. Whether it's fans getting together back when I was a kid, and a new album come out, and we can't wait to unwrap it and read it while it's playing on the turntable and all that. And a lot of that is lost now, but still people say, hey man, listen to this. If you're driving in the car together and the favorites, I got to hear this, and you crank it up, or go to a show together. And then even at your level, you all know each other and play together,
We can only hope that's still happening in with young people, but it's a different delivery system is all. I think that they have a quicker network, a quick text, to check this out on Spotify. I think the social aspect is that we enjoyed is gone, of going to the record store, getting that vinyl, looking at everything on it, the words, everything on it, where it was recorded, right down to the RIAA approval, where it said high fidelity, or stereo, or wow, or mono, which I prefer, and the opening, taking the plastic off and the smell of it, and playing both sides, and being with a friend or two or three, and playing it over and over like 4 times, and therefore the sequencing was very important when they put a record together. Where today they're thinking, what are the singles? We're going to release one track at a time, The romantic notion that we had about it is gone, but maybe not forever, because vinyl is coming back. And I think that people are like, hey, I just, check out these. We used to be like, a friend would say, I just got some JBL 100s. Come over, L100s. And we'll listen. My parents aren't home. We can turn it up, I grew. And I think maybe now they're enjoying that part of, that sonic experience of hearing the vinyl through a great sound system. So it's just in flux. It just changes, and the delivery system is totally different for even, I was like, well, you mean I have like enough time to put like 58 minutes on a CD, but you still only give me 42 minutes on vinyl. So you have to lose tracks when you make vinyl. And that was very difficult, abandoning 2 of my children.
Exactly. Well, but for me,
they're happy, and they're like, oh, you can tell people, they can go to Spotify and listen to the other 2 tracks. I say, yeah, but it's not like having it all, but you can't have everything.
Can't argue with them. Well, you can't see it because I have your virtual background here of your album cover, but I've got autographed albums.
I can see it fine. It's great. I should think of the same thing. I should make
I'll give this to you, man. I can email it to you. Or send you a link so you can download it and you can use it.
Send it to me.
Be happy to.
I like it. Yeah. Danny Clinch took that photo. The great Danny Clinch, who was like a major photographer, but also a friend of mine, and a great harp player too. I knew him as a harp player before I knew him as a photographer. And
wow,
and I didn't know that the actual truth was that he was like this world famous rock photographer for quite a while. And that picture, that double exposure picture, was a mistake. He was doing a portrait shot at the Beacon Theater downstairs. He had a setup for an event we were playing, and he said, "Oh damn, I stopped. Let me see it." I said, "Let me see it." I said, save that. We're going to need that, man. So, yeah, yeah.
That's just how it is, man. It's the mistakes that we think are mistakes, and they turn out to be exactly what we want or what was needed.
Well, yeah, yeah, sure. That's when the blues and rock and roll merged. You know,
Yeah.
someone's impression of what it sounded like. You know, the Rolling Stones impression or Fleetwood Mac's impression that we heard Johnny Winter, Jeff Beck, Jimmy Page, Clapton, all of those, Leslie West, all Mike Bloomfield and Paul Butterfield. It was their impression of what the guys were doing in Chicago. And it was just heavier and
Mm-hmm.
louder. And all of a sudden, it fit right in with rock and roll. I mean, it
Yep.
really, when blues rock hit the scene, that's where it started to explode with Hendrix and Johnny Winter and Clapton and Beck and Page and all these guys just playing Chicago blues really loud. That was,
Yeah.
and the guy would always tell me, we were playing it loud too in the clubs. It was just as loud. Just when we got up to Chess Records, they made us turn everything down because they had a standard that it had to be clean. But he said,
Yeah.
I never got my sound on record until years later, So, and Hendrix apparently saw Buddy playing loud and doing feedback and playing with his teeth. And between,
Mm-hmm.
he actually took a lot from Buddy Guy. And we're lucky to have Buddy Guy around still to tell these tales.
I've seen him a couple of times, friends with his son, Greg. And another thing you can't see here, Greg got me a signed T-shirt from Buddy, and I've got it framed. I got a blues wall in my office here.
Yeah.
Signed albums and all that for there. And, but yeah, you're right. I'm seeing Janie Hendrix next week. The Experience Hendrix thing is coming through near here. So I've interviewed her 2 or 3 times to get to meet her in person next week finally. But that's, what a legacy Hendrix has given us, and everybody still talks about him. Yeah.
I love Janie that she, is fearless and also is in, people say, oh, she's controlling. Oh, she's controlling. When Hendrix died, there was no control and everything came out in horrible bootleg forms and just like stuff that wasn't really worthy of being released, and she put a lid on that and took control of it and has reissued that stuff in a very respectful way, along with Eddie Kramer a lot of times, along with Eddie at her side, and Mitch Mitchell before he passed was involved with Billy Cox, the people that were involved with Jimmy, and she was just a little kid, when Jimmy was, so to her credit, she has put the class back into the catalog that it deserves, yeah.
Well, it reflects her class. I remember the first or second interview I did with her. I put it out on one of the Hendrix Facebook pages. Say, hey, check this out. Oh my gosh, you would have thought.
Oh, don't listen. You know what?
Oh, I know.
It's there's a woman, Tony Ann, that managed Hubert Sumlin in the last leg of his, when he got to his respect, and there were always people, saying this and that and this and that. You try taking that much responsibility on, and finding someone everyone should appreciate, that these people saved the lives of these blues musicians by taking them under their wing. The same thing happened with Charlie Parker and Monk. There were always patrons. The same thing happened with Michelangelo and Da Vinci and Raphael. They were patrons of the arts. The church paid for them. There always have had to be people that keep artists, like, first of all, on the straight and narrow path and working, and also getting the respect they deserve. Then there's always people that thinking they should be doing it, yet they're not. They're not the ones.
Well, I mean, and in the case of Janie, I mean, I shudder to think where Hendrix's legacy would be now if there wasn't such a tight-fisted control of everything about him. I mean, some corporation would own it all right now.
Well,
if it wasn't.
The images. Listen, Stevie Ray's estate, and Jimmy's a very good friend of mine.
I love Jimmy.
Constantly being ripped off by people saying, Stevie Ray Vaughan distortion pedal, Stevie Ray Vaughan, this and that, Stevie Ray Vaughan, this and that, and the trail of lawyer fees and lawyers of trying to keep this stuff in a respectful place is very difficult. If you're not Disney and you can't, put a stamp on Mickey Mouse and you can sue everybody that uses it, it gets expensive because yes, people can be liable, but you're still paying legal fees, like incredible
That's right.
legal fees.
Try to collect.
So they take a chance. They say they're not going to sue me. It's going to cost them too much, and they throw T-shirts, all kinds of stuff come out, and it's
well, Clapton's attorneys do a good job. I mean, they stay on top of it pretty good. But now here's what I've been asking this a lot in the last several interviews I've done. I'll ask you up front, and then we'll get to this great album here. What do you think the impact of AI is having and going to have? Because I'm seeing all these catalogs selling off. And now, and big corporations are winding up with them because they got the deep pockets, right? And then you have AI coming into play. I hope at the very least it tightens up the accounting so royalties are paid the way they should be.
Well, they haven't been anyway. Randy, they haven't been anyway. Since Spotify and iTunes took over, my BMI and ASCAP and all the agencies, they can't even collect on this. There's nothing to collect. There's pennies. Everyone complained for years about the record company taking, say, 75% of the pie in order to operate. But that 25% that you were getting was in the hundreds of thousands to millions, depending on your sales. Now it's hundreds to thousands. Okay. All right. Be careful what you wish for, because when you bury the corporation, the record companies, and replace the record companies with Spotify and all these other streaming services, your 25% is now 0.5%. Okay, so operating costs are a consideration. Record companies did a lot of evil things over the years. We could have a debate forever, but in the outcome, you have to be careful with greed. The dog who the old moral, the old parable about the dog with a big bone in his mouth, and he's walking over the bridge and he looks in the water and he sees the reflection of a dog with a bigger bone, and he jumps in and he loses the bone in his mouth. Now comes out of the water soaking wet with nothing, and that's what happened with the greed of from both sides, the artists and the record companies, is that it was doomed to fail as soon as there was an option, and the problem is that artists are not getting a fair shake now. So AI is exactly what it says it is: artificial, and it's artificial intelligence. It's not real intelligence. The artificially intelligent people who are fine with accepting things that are artificially intelligently created, just as a reflection on on society the way it is now. It's a good enough society, because the best hamburger is McDonald's because it sells the most, not because it's the best hamburger. And artificial intelligence will allow movie companies now the first people that are going to get destroyed is in a business that I work extensively in, are film composers and television composers for TV shows, soundtrack composers. They're going to be replaced by AI probably quicker than anything, because now the director can go to a tech, not even a musician, just have a tech guy, a computer guy with him, and say, okay, go to this app and make me a Mozart string quartet for this scene. And it will, okay? I don't think Mozart's estate or any kind of estate is getting paid. If somebody says, and I could be wrong, but they've got to get this together, because if somebody's going to actually type in, make me a Beatles song, well, the Beatles should be, their estate, they should be paid for it. They should be paid for it. As soon as or if they say, make me a song like She Loves You, Beatles should be paid for it. The writer should be paid for that. If it's there's so much language that has to be defined in the use of AI. But if you just say, make me a classical string quartet and nobody's name is attached, it's going to be good enough for that movie, I think, and for that
Yeah.
composer, and for an industry that's more into CGI, than it is into actually filming things. So it's going to hurt film composers and composers on TV the most. I think every AI generated song that I've heard that claims to be a Beatles song or a Beach Boys song, it's just crap.
Yeah.
It's just crap.
Yeah.
I mean, in comparison with the real thing, it's the McDonald's burger again. People
Yep.
are eating it up, though. I don't know. I can rant forever about this, Randy, because it's it can be used in so many good ways. But
I agree.
We tend to do things like, as soon as we get an AI type of thing, first we want to apply it to the arts to rip off artists, and then we want to apply it to making war tools. We want to apply it to war. It goes right to the war. We go right to war with everything, and if not war and artists, the third, maybe fourth consideration will be medicine, where it could be really useful.
That's where it's needed. Yeah,
that's where it's needed, and I don't know how there could be any kind of reins put on some of these things. Say, wait a minute, the unions have destroyed us and helped us all our lives, but they're powerless in this. The musicians union and the film composers, the societies and the directors guild and all these people, they have no power to say no, you can't use it in our industry,
Yeah.
So as long as they comply with it, if they somehow banned it, I'm sure there would be a legal case that would go before the Supreme Court about the right to use it. So we're killing ourselves with litigation. So I don't know what the end result is, but I think it's unhealthy in the arts.
Yep. I just wish AI would take over Washington, D.C., and then that way they can they can make smart laws.
There has to be intelligence there to begin with. See?
Well, maybe that would doom AI if they did that. So
yeah, I mean, we're seeing. Look, I mean, we're in such the world and the countries in such flux now, like we've never seen. It's like we were part of a generation, a hippie generation of, we were protesting a war that was wrong, and we were protesting a lot of things, but a lot of we didn't get as much done in the end of it. A lot of our leaders became status quo guys like Jerry Rubin, guys that we were, I even went, me and Felix Cavalieri played a gig. I was in a band with him for quite a while, and from the Rascals, the organ player, lead singer. For those who don't know, look it up. You could look it up. Yeah. We played a rib festival in Cleveland, Ohio. Felix and I are old time radicals, man. And Felix says to me, I gotta introduce you to somebody that's here at the rib festival. He's participating in the competition. Yeah, he's making these great ribs. And he takes me into this little trailer and he introduces me to Bobby Seale from the Black Panthers, who was a revolutionary.
Wow. Uh-huh.
And I said to myself, with all due respect, I said, Bobby Seale, rib festival, competing in a rib festival. Okay, the 60s are definitely over, but his ribs were fabulous then. He's just a human being too, I mean,
became a capitalist,
Well, yeah.
That's what goes around comes around, and it's somewhere in there could be some equilibrium, I think. But
but it doesn't mean that everything that Bobby Seale wrote, when I read it all, shouldn't be read and listened to. And it doesn't negate his importance in that era. But like anything else in history, you don't cancel it. It's got to be there so we can compare it to what's going on. You don't say it has to be. It was hard enough for H. Rap Brown and Bobby Seale and guys like that to get their books published and out there into the public for us to read and get another opinion. It doesn't say we had to agree with them, but we sure should read everything, from everybody's side of things. And that's the problem today, that it's like one side or the other. The line in the sand is a chasm. You can't even cross it and shake hands. The rift is too big. and
Yeah.
people are if they don't listen to them, they yell back at you, they yell at you, and they go ah, like a little child, if you're not agreeing. We
Or
should
they
all
tap
agree
it.
to disagree, Yeah.
Or they'll type in all caps to really make their point, right?
Well, I, I think there's some people, and I'm not going to say who, are just too dumb to know you don't do that.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
keep going.
Well, hey, this album I absolutely love, Jimmy. It is so good. I love the blues. I'm not an expert on it, but I know what I like when I hear it. And man, this album blew me away. Tell me about it, how it all came about, and who all's on it, and give me the liner notes too.
COVID, it was an amazing. You could use that time or not. We were sequestered, whether you agreed with what was going on or not, and right away I was just like 24 hours when it first started, 24 hours a day, poisoned by every cable news network out there with every opinion and every talking head. We don't even have journalists anymore. We just have news readers now. I wasn't getting a report from Walter Cronkite or Eric Severide or Barbara Walters or somebody telling me what the facts were, and then you make your own opinion. I was getting opinions. I was getting political opinions, everything but the truth. We were getting everything but the truth. So I just said, that's enough of that. And I had written a song. One of the songs on there is about 30-something years old that Catherine Russell, the great Catherine Russell, recorded twice with me, called Fool's Gold. And then I said, well,
I love that song.
I said, that's a pretty good song. I think I can, I should start writing songs again. I hadn't written any songs for 30 years almost, I had done some, I'd written some with Shamika Copeland. I had written a bunch for my friend Bill Perry, who had a couple of records. And I would write if there was a situation, but I wasn't writing just because I was like, I need to write something now because of what's going on. The only outlet I had was playing guitar every day and starting to write songs. So I did, and the first one I wrote was Blues in the 21st, which is the first song on there. And that was just about the absurdity. It's me, like me appearing as, for the first verse, as someone else, as this predator that's going to go in with his mask on and take shit freely off the shelf of the CVS where you're trying to shop or wherever you're going, and walk out through the door because politics had allowed this catch and release thing in New York City. It had allowed that. It said, you can take up to $900 worth of shit and nothing's going to happen to you. And they advertised that.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I have friends sitting in jail for selling an ounce of pot, in the 60s.
Yep.
So, and I'm like, well, what is this lawlessness that's become the law? Where's the quality of life going to go? And then it started that in New York City, I was stepping over people with needles in their arms, and nobody was, nobody was moving them to a secure place, or I'm not saying to arrest those people, but don't leave them. So you walk out your door, you got to step over them. That's a bad sign for society. New York was going crazy with a DA that was just letting everybody go. And they were repeat offenders and everything. And I think that there needs to be some law and order. It's not like, that's not a bad enough crime. You got to wait till someone's murdered to put them away,
A little late then.
And so the quality of life, that song is a complaint basically about the quality of life going away, and the mask had become another device. It was meant to protect us. And now it was used as like a bandit's mask. Nobody could identify it. Nobody could recognize or identify anybody. And it's still going on with these unhealthy, college protests with masks and cosplay, people dressing up, thinking it's, not looking at the facts and seeing where the real problem lies. It's just young people will protest as sort of a get together. As Comic-Con, or it's just like Coachella. We're all going to be there, and dressed up a certain way, and wearing masks or whatever the hell else they're wrapping their heads in, and just having a ball. They're having fun, and they're not looking at the facts. So,
Right.
I say examine all the facts. I don't take sides in any of these things. I just think that we're not acting right. And then the rest of the record, it falls into. There's one about the ecology, going down fast. That's a warning, and I do say from both sides. There's one line. It doesn't. We're going off a cliff. It doesn't matter a cliff if you're running on lithium or octane gas. We're all going. Doesn't matter, because the lithium automobiles and the electric cars are going to cause just as much trouble. On the electric grids are going to tax. If we went totally electric, the electric grid would go crazy. It would be incredibly overloaded, and I think it's going to be back to horses at some point.
Might not be a bad idea.
Well, you remember, and I think there was I don't know if it was in Mad Max or some movie where there's a horse pulling a car. We may get back to, hey, my GTO and my mule, to get me. It's a cool car and it's mule powered, But I think you have to say what you feel. And the blues is a complaint, basically put to music. One way or the other, Willie Dixon said you can have the blues because your woman left, or you can have the blues because she came back. So, he was a brilliant writer. And then there's stuff like just getting older, like going to be two of those days, of you're dropping your prescription down. Don't take your pills over an open drain, you're going to drop
That's
one.
right.
And
I know that all too well.
The everyday complaints of the stubbing your toe for going through life are in there. And then there's always, the song like Ruby, about all the women you've known that it's not going to come out. It's not going to turn out right. But you just keep going back. It's just like it's like drugs or alcohol. It's like, at the end of the run, you're going to have a hangover or you're going to be strung out. And love is the same way. And it's amalgam of a bunch of different people. And it's Be Warned of the Black Widow Spider, all that. And it's taken from a lot of different blues tunes I was influenced by. Mainly Strange Brew by Cream. That one's got a real Strange Brew thing happening. And then there's a Willie Dixon, Dr. John, Shady Side of the Street. That's just about watching what when you walk around the corner. It used to be like that when I was in New Orleans. People would say to me, "Oh yeah, where are you staying?" I'd tell them where I'm staying. Say, "Be careful, 2 blocks away. Don't make a right." Keep walking straight, man.
Just keep it going. Yep.
And New York City was like that too. Oh yeah, it's fine if you don't turn and get that street between 8th and 9th Avenue, 48th Street. Don't take that. Or between whatever street it was, 46th got a little weird for a while. And most of them there's every style of blues that I grew up with without really, the only one that's really a straightforward, straight from the shoulder blues is Beware the Wolf. The one that's, influenced by Howlin' Wolf, but it's also about, those bedtime stories, kind of Three Pigs kind of stories that we were told. And I always marvel at growing up and my parents taking me to read me a story before bed, like, okay, there's 3 billy goats and they're crossing over a bridge, but underneath is a troll that's going to kill them and eat them. So, and good night. I'll see you in the morning, that kind of
sleep,
stuff.
Sleep well, kiddo.
If you walk in the forest and see a gingerbread house, don't go in there. There's a witch. She's waiting to cook you in the oven, So, I'll see you at breakfast,
Maybe.
And so heed the warning of Beware the Wolf. Again, the wolf in sheep's clothing. You can apply it to whoever you want. I don't target any one thing. It's the fruit's hanging too low now. But I think that on both sides you will find wolves in sheep's clothing. On both sides of the coin. There are 2 sides. to everything. And that's something, if we realize that there are two sides and we examine what those two sides are, we may then have an opinion that wasn't, that we're just not aping from some talking head on a news station, and that's the biggest fear, is that people will be lined up as, dependent on, you can hear them when they talk. Oh, who are you watching? Hannity or Anderson Cooper,
Yeah, exactly.
And where are you in that? What's your opinion in that?
Right. Yeah. That's why I quit watching the news. I read, I want to know what's going on in the world, but I don't get wrapped around the axle on it anymore.
But it's even infiltrated that behavior, which is something that's amazing, because the press was always fair and balanced. The big papers, the New York Times, the Post, the Washington Post, whatever big city you're near, they used to be, nonpartisan and just like, delivering the facts to you. But now they're tainted too. We've seen more and more how their staffs are being like, turned inside out because they only say, speak from one side. And that's not what the news is supposed to be. But I'm getting older, and
that's right.
and I have all I have left is hope for the younger generation, that they always seem to pull through it somehow. Remember our parents, that rock and roll that was the end of the world, So and that that we gotta go, but the big bands are coming back from the 40s, guitars are going out, the Decca record exec that didn't sign the Beatles because he said guitars are going out in 1963. So it's always been that. There's always been a status quo that needs to be, sort of tumbled a bit.
Yeah.
And young people are amazing. They pull through. They will figure it out. They will figure it out because they're going to know that it's left to them. It's going to be in their hands, whatever it is. I can only hope for the best and hope the Armageddon and apocalypse are just like, moral warnings.
The wolf under the bed. Yeah.
Yeah. Listen, the Bible was written hundreds of years after the fact of these events,
Mm-hmm.
So just imagine when you tell somebody a story down the telephone line, how 20 people later it changes. The old aristocrats joke, in that movie.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's what we're basing our beliefs on, is stories that we're told, to try to keep people, and they all basically are saying, be good, or this is going to happen to you. And that, and, I think it's not to take them literally. It's to take them as, moral lessons. Yep. And when people start taking them literally, like, it's not what was intended, I think. But I don't want to get too much into religion, because it's an important thing to have some sort of faith, whatever that faith is, even if it's faith in humankind, it's faith,
Yeah. Yep. Well, I know who's on this album because I read the one sheet, but tell viewers who all is on this album. You got a couple of heavy hitters on there along with you.
Well, the drummers, Rich Pagano. Rich Pagano is the co-producer and the engineer for the main sessions, that we did in his basement in Stone Ridge, New York. Rich Pagano played drums, and the other drummer percussionist is Mark Teixeira. Rich Pagano and I have had a band called the Fab Four for years with Will Lee, which is a Beatle, not a tribute band, but it's a Beatle classical. Our impression with the Fab Four was that, well, if the Philharmonic's doing a Mozart concert, they don't dress in powdered wigs and knickers. They play the music.
Right.
So that was the Fab Four. It's about totally studio musicians playing this music, and giving it the respect and the history. So Rich, that's where I met Rich, and we've been working together in a lot of different projects since then. Mark Teixeira, the other drummer percussionist, has been played with Duke Robillard for years. He's a guy from Providence, Rhode Island. And Jesse Williams, the bass player, and I and Mark Teixeira had played with Al Cooper for over 25 years together in the Recuperators. And Jesse also played bass with the North Mississippi All-Stars. So he's just a hit man. He's one of the best bass players I know. So we recorded as a trio, just the three of us, Jesse, myself, and Rich mostly. And then I had Mark do some percussion overdubs down the road. And then I went to various studios. And Johnny Lee Shell did some sessions. He was Bonnie Raitt's guitar player for years. He's got a great little studio here, and I did some overdubs there. And I did 3 or 4 other studios, just hitting here and there. And we did, and we did one last session in Woodstock. And on that last session, John Sebastian joined us for a couple, and Scott Healy, my piano player that played with me on the Conan show for 25 years.
Right.
He played some piano and accordion on those 3 songs. Beware the Wolf, Going Down Fast, and Back Up the Country was just me and John and Jesse on upright. That last one was a tribute to Alan Wilson and Cad Heat, which I'm also a member of currently.
I saw that.
Yeah, we had a new album out that was great last year, and this one came right on the heels of that. We had Final Vinyl out. And then I went to Joe Bonamassa to do some guitar overdubs on the first song, because I've known him since he was like 12 years old, and he's sort of like my godson, I call him, I'm very proud of his work with the blues and with blues rock and keeping it going. And his Keeping the Blues Alive Foundation is important. Along with the other blues societies everywhere in every pocket. But being out on the road, I'm meeting more people from blues societies, which is really a wonderful thing that they're keeping it going. So yeah, that's about it. We didn't have a lot of guests. I could have done the thing where I could have gone to 10 other guys, but I found that tiresome after a while. Of when you're listening, you're a guitar player, you're playing your music, and you're listening like 7 other guitar players on your album, trying to use it as bait to get people to buy your album. If I haven't done enough in my 70 years to merit, like some respect, I'm not going to get it, and I'm not going to get it that way. Joe and I are like such family that it was simply, yeah, Joe, you got it, and he's like, yeah, I got it. So that was good. But I'll tell you, it was cut pretty quickly. It was the first sessions were cut in 2 days, and then the Woodstock session in 1 day, so in 3 days. And then I went all over the place, and even did some organ overdubs of my own up in Boston at Berkeley, the Berkeley Organ Lab up there. Yeah, Dave Lamina, who runs that, gave us the keys to the organ lab. So we went and did some organs up there. I played on a couple of all the organ. In fact, is I guess I'm all the B3 parts. Yeah. And it all came together, and I'm pretty proud of it. It feels like, well, I put a lot of thought into the sequencing because of what you and I talked about earlier, about the dream that somebody will sit down and listen to it from top to bottom.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is asking a lot these days of people to put that much time aside for music. They'll say, "Oh, I got your single. I like it. I listen to it." It's, and I know. I mean, I've been listening. I haven't. I'm not on much blues radio stations. They're not picking me up. That's just, it's not a complaint. It's just a fact. Old guys don't sell on these stations unless they're dead. and then their records are played. So, I luckily I've made a lot of friends along the way that want to talk to me, like you and David Frick over at Sirius, but Sirius, the BB King station doesn't play my records, but that's okay. The college stations do, the jazz stations do. People that don't talk about AI. I think there's an algorithm at some of these satellite radio stations that tell the DJs what they're going to play, what their playlist is. I prefer the college stations that say, oh, I'm going to play this and this. They walk in with their own opinion. Again,
The way it
gay
used to
guys at
be.
work.
The way
The
it used to
algorithm
be.
is at work saying, "Nah, but wait, he's 70. No, we're not playing this record." So yeah, it's funny. It's you don't make a record for any other reason that it's the music's in you, and you must get it out. You have to get it out. If somebody likes it, if 10 people like it, I'm happy. If one person digs it, that's fine. I got to one person. It's not a numbers game anymore. There's no. It's funny. There's one song on there. Going to be two of those days. That song. I played it for Al Cooper. I said, Al, I think you. Yeah, if you don't know Al Cooper, you probably know him from the Dylan movie that's out now.
I don't know him personally, but I've known about him ever since I got into music.
He's my best friend in the world. He just stepped out of my record collection into my life in a great way.
Oh,
so
cool.
I said, this Al, I'm going to play you this song. It sounds an awful lot like one of your songs. I said, I was thinking of you and Johnny Guitar Watson and Mose Allison when I wrote this. It's called Going to Be Two of Those Days. He said, well, that's a good title. I said, I played it for him. He said, yeah, it does kind of sound like that song of mine, but so what? Everything's influenced. Everyone's influenced by everybody. And I said, well, do you want to maybe put it down as a co-write? And he said to me, snapped right back at me and said, well, why should I make no money twice? Knowing full well, the last 5 records we worked on together didn't do anything. Yeah. They just laid there. Because we were already, passe, in that way. But I don't care about all that. I really feel like the point of having a record now is to come to your town with my trio and play my songs and meet people. And Elvis style, sell them out of the back of the car.
There you go.
And that was the way Elvis started in 1954 and everybody else did. Can you imagine a Cadillac or a Chevy even with a trunk load of 78s and all of the band gear strapped to the roof? And you got Scotty and Bill and Elvis and DJ all in the car driving,
He was my first concert I ever went to. Elvis Presley.
In 70s?
73 in Phoenix, Arizona. I met the Colonel there too. I got to the show real early and I caught him on the floor. I was 14 years old. Yeah. And I say that's my first celebrity interview was the Colonel. So
well, I'm glad you got him, he's a fascinating guy. What did you think of Tom Hanks's portrayal?
I didn't like it, honestly. I thought it was way. First of all, I read that Tom promised the Colonel's widow that he was going to treat him right, and I don't think he did. And I love Tom Hanks, but I vehemently disagree with how the Colonel was portrayed. And
Tom didn't write the script, but he could have.
No, but he had some sway. I'm sure. But I interviewed a guy he's a friend of mine now, Marshall Terrell. He co-wrote a book about the Colonel. He co-wrote it with the Colonel's protege, Greg McDonald, who unfortunately passed away right after the book came out and before I could interview him. So Marshall and I talked, and that book is fascinating. And it gives a lot of inside baseball about the relationship between the Colonel and Elvis and what was really going on and why certain things went the way they did. And if people would read that book, they would not be as hard on the Colonel as most people are.
The Colonel was like a P.T. Barnum character,
Yep.
And if you look closely enough in politics, you'll find a very powerful man who is the same guy.
Now, John Kennedy these days,
that knows how to sell shit, and puts, it's funny because that salesmanship quality that the Colonel had is every reason that Elvis Presley was as popular as he was.
That's right.
There were some equally talented people. Of course, Elvis checked all the boxes.
Right.
He was a humble, respectful, yes sir, no ma'am, raised Southerner, right? That really was a nice guy that had incredible looks, and
Oh, yeah.
then that the talent, the singing, but the singing wouldn't have been enough alone without everything else,
No.
and without promo man, and without a guy that was actually signing the autographs, the Colonel, just like, and dumping them out, and everyone learned from that. Brian Epstein, they all learned from the Colonel, everybody, God, even the, there were a lot of shysters and a lot of, like hucksters and that, but it takes that to sell any, it takes that Mr. Haney quality that the Colonel had. I think Mr. Haney in Green Acres was closer to the Colonel than the guy.
Well, they were friends, and and they were and he used the Colonel as his model for Haney. So you nailed it.
I always felt that was what the Colonel was like, although he was Dutch and not, And that was a little known fact. He wasn't a colonel,
Right. But some say he wasn't even a legal citizen, at least not right away. But hey, before I forget, you're involved with the Fab Four. I've got a tie to that.
The Fab Four, we are. The Fab Four.
Fab Four.
Because the Fab Four are they're a wigs and suits band.
Yeah, I didn't enunciate that quite clear enough.
With all due respect, Fab Four, we love what you do, but we don't do that.
That's right. Yeah. Well, you guys play it note perfect from what I'm told. But the guy, so my intro songs and outro on my podcast and on my video, it's a song called "Roll the Dice," and it was recorded by a dear friend of mine by the name of Quentin Hope. Quentin, or Q as friends call him, is good friends with Will Lee. So there was that whole, and not super tight. And I've never gotten around to approaching Will about interviewing him. I'd just love to talk to him too. What a bass player, right?
Oh, man, even Paul McCartney cited him as one of his favorites, Will.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, they've crossed paths many times, those two. And that's a pretty good endorsement, but I'll tell you, he's world class. The only reason I joined the Fab Four was because Will Lee was asking me to do it. And I said, well, any chance to play with this guy, it's going to be good. It's not going to be just a one-off, man. It's going to be good, and it's going to be respectful to the music over everything. And I learned that from Paul Schaefer and Will and a lot of my friends in New York, to respect the records. If I was backing up Benny King, if I was backing up Darlene Love or Phoebe Snow or anybody, I always respected the records first. When you play the music right, the singer steps up, except for Chuck Berry. Right. Chuck Berry didn't care, but I didn't care either. Because if you have the privilege of knowing Chuck Berry, he knows you, that should be enough. Right. No one should have an opinion on what he should or shouldn't be doing, because he's the funny. Reason. Yeah.
He's the reason, and it's funny you bring him up. I just finished it yesterday. The documentary, The Original King of Rock and Roll, that the family put out, and wow, I learned a lot that I didn't know by watching.
Well, he got bitter because he was set up, in a terrible way, in a time when the Mann Act was used against him as a rock star. And nobody else, no one else. That never happened to anybody else. And he was bitter when he came out about it, and rightly so. But he wrote the Bible on how, him and Willie Dixon are the two most important writers to come out of that period, and that set us up for what became rock and roll and blues rock. And even Bob Dylan would agree that without Chuck Berry, he wouldn't have had Subterranean Homesick Blues and a lot of other. He wouldn't have had the idea to write songs that were like Maybelline kind of, that
Yeah.
or
Well,
too much,
Elvis wouldn't have
too
had
much
the
monkey
hits that he
business
had.
was kind of the mold for model for that and stuff,
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
So, well, what have you got planned in support of this album? I know you got some touring going on with another big name. And who's in your band going out on the road?
Well,
And with,
mostly it's me. Mostly it's me and Jesse Williams and Rich Pagano, the band that cut the record, and then sometimes it's Mark Teixeira on drums if Rich can't do it. It's on the West Coast. I use some different musicians because it's not worth it to fly people from New York and put them up to do a couple of gigs here and there. But for the most part of my tour through the country, I'm using those guys. And we're just starting this thing. We just did like 3 weeks straight, and it was a ball, man. Just up and down from starting up in Buffalo, New York, all the way down to Miami. I got a blues cruise with Joe Bonamassa for 5 days, and then came off and did 5 more dates in Florida. And then we got stuff coming up in May in the Midwest in Chicago, and we'll be a Buddy Guys Legends even, So I haven't played there for a while. I always have good friends in Chicago, and so we're just getting started with that, putting our foot in the water to see how the temperature is, and it's been pretty good, and it's been a joy for me to meet people who will say to me, "Oh man, a guitar player. I've been watching you since I was like 8." On the Conan show, a guy that's like 31. We were on in '93. Don't forget. So some young player is to know that somebody says they're playing guitar because of you is that's the best payment you could get. Is that you influence somebody to do something constructive and something with their art. Whether you do it, you don't have to do it full time to be a good guitar player. There's a lot of the best bluegrass players are like mailmen and plumbers in Kentucky somewhere, man. and they get together once a week, or they're in Jackson, Mississippi, wherever they are, man. They're playing from their heart, and it doesn't take getting paid for the gig to be a good player. That's for sure.
That's right.
The opposite actually works sometimes. You don't even have to be that good to get paid. But you got to be that good to sit with some of those bluegrass guys, man.
Well, how'd the connection to tour with Bill Murray and his band come about?
Well, I know all of the Murray brothers since the late 70s, between Chicago and New York. And just are hanging out in the same bars mostly and playing, off the cuff, music sessions at those bars. I'd be playing, and then Andy Murray would come in, and Bill would come in, and Brian would come in, and Johnny would come in, and Joel, and they would all come in, and mostly Andy and Bill would sing. Brian and Johnny and Joel, we'd drink, and then we'd all drink, and then we would sing some more. It was just kind of a social thing in New York City, and then up in Chicago, and so I started going down to Bill Murray does a Caddyshack tournament, in Florida every year in Sarasota there, where the Golf Music Hall of Fame is.
Right.
There's a Caddyshack restaurant there, so we do a fundraiser there every year, and I would go down and play, and Bill would come and we do a jam on the last night. We do a big session. And then last year, Albert Castilla and Mike Zito came down, the Blood Brothers.
Two great guys.
Mike had already signed me to the label. I know Mike for a long time, and Albert was kind of a new friend. And then something happened at the Caddyshack tournament. It was like the Rat Pack up there, It was just so much fun. And then Zito, of course, he's the head always as far as business goes. Zito was like, we should do this in front of people. We should go out and do this, Bill. Why don't you and Albert and Jimmy and we use the Blood Brothers band, the existing band, and we do like a little review, where we all do numbers. We throw it around on stage, and just have a good time. And Bill went for it. He liked the idea. It was a right time in his life in a year or two, he might not want to do it. Right now, he wanted to do it, and we've been having just so much fun. And the
That's cool.
audiences have been great, and they've been having a lot of fun. And there's a post-COVID, you know, kind of drive that we have to have fun again. You know, and this is part of it. It's funny how you try to say, gee, this might not have happened before. We all weren't sure if we were going to live, and then when we do come out on the other end, we're all of a sudden we're like Scrooge on Christmas morning, go buy that goose, the one as big as me, he's a remarkable boy, we're just like, we're saved, and we're like, what can we do?
Yeah,
that's good, that's fun and good, and have people get people together again. And I think it's kind of it's a joy. It's one of the really joys is to play with those guys as much as I can do it. Schedules provided. We've been pretty lucky that we've all made most of them. I've been the wild card because I was promoting an album at the same time that we decided to start doing this. And Mike Zito's kind of torn. He's like, well, you got to promote the album. It's on my label, and
that's right.
You got to do this, and I'm like, well, we're going to find a way to make it all happen, and it's been just great. I'm grateful in a lot of ways to. At my age, I wasn't going to fish. I wasn't going to golf. I certainly wasn't jumping out of airplanes or climbing mountains or doing anything. I don't like to lay in the sun in the Caribbean. There's too many bugs. I just don't. I'm not a beach guy, and it was like, what would be retirement? What would be special? Well, after 27 or 8 years or whatever, close to 30 years of golden handcuffs, meaning that you're chained to a studio chair with gold, though, pure gold, and you can't go out and play music all the time.
Right.
And so playing and when I decided to do that, playing my own music was going to be more important than just doing blues covers all night, because in the past I'd done that, and that's kind of fine for clubbing around and just jamming and all that. But playing your own music is so gratifying when you see people like it, or if they dance to it. I used to me and Sebastian worked with this guy, Yank Brechel, who was an old mandolin and guitar player, from Brownsville, Tennessee, that played with the original John Lee Williamson, Sonny Boy Williamson, and played with Sleepy John Estes in a trio with Hammy Nixon, a great trio. And he used to say to me, don't forget, if people aren't dancing, your music's not working. That's right. You're not supposed to sit there like,
Yep.
The whole thing is that he said, don't forget, we're not musicians, we're entertainers. So those guys, they worked house parties, they busked on street corners, they were busking with a tin can, playing. They're playing they said they were playing private functions for white folks, for black folks, for anybody that would hire them. And they were entertaining, playing more than just the blues. And Robert Johnson probably had to play all kinds of foxtrots and different kind of dances.
Yeah.
It was about which dances are people dancing, and then you slip your music in, but make sure they're dancing to it. And that was always the way with the blues. Yeah.
I became aware of Zito when I was living in Dallas. I'd started Boomerocity, and I was there for a Johnny Winter concert because I had interviewed Johnny and Paul both. And you're talking earlier about people that are watching out for other people. Paul, I think, was Johnny's saving grace. And but it was at the Granada Theater in Dallas, and they were playing these videos, and they, oh no, I take that back. Zito was opening for Johnny, and then he came out and played with Johnny sometime during the thing, and I just became an instant fan. And and then so I've interviewed Mike, I don't know, 3 or 4 times, Albert 2 or 3 times, and both of them are just the nicest guys, man. I love them both.
Getting back to Paul Nelson, who saved Johnny Winter's life, basically, okay? and put him on. Paul Nelson, God bless him forever. And Johnny was like Rip Van Winkle, waking up out of a fog after Paul got a hold of him and straightened him out, got him away from the bad people that were keeping him high for 40 years, or more like 50 years. And I was lucky enough to play on Johnny's next to the last record with a bunch of great people. Now, Johnny did that. Johnny Winter doing what I said I didn't want to do is a different thing. Because when someone asks me and Warren and Haynes and Derek Trucks and Sonny Landreth and Paul Nelson's one of the ones that put this all together. And when they ask us to play on Johnny's record, that's because Johnny knew us all. And Johnny liked us all. And Johnny was like our mentor in a lot of ways. And we all wanted to do it. Johnny didn't need our help doing it. We wanted to do it. And Paul, it was a way of Paul saying thank you to all of us who supported Johnny through all those weird times that he was having, man, And Johnny didn't forget that, who he really liked, to be on his record. And that was a pleasure. And that was all because of Paul too. Because Paul came from a band called Liege Lord, which was a heavy metal, a dark heavy metal band, but he always had that blues root. And I don't know, he rescued Johnny from oblivion, really, because I had gone to see Johnny before Paul stepped in, and he was I think they just had him on methadone, like really, and he was playing in circles. He would play the song, and then we'd go back and play the same exact solo over, sing the same verse, and he wasn't really present. And then when Paul straightened him out, he all of a sudden his singing, his playing, everything was like way up again, And he's that doesn't get mentioned enough.
No, I agree. And boy, I was stunned when he passed away. But the last time I saw Paul in person, it wasn't the last time I interviewed him, was at the Granada Theater. We were all in, Johnny traveled around in a small RV. It wasn't even a big tour bus.
Yeah.
And they had just played on Letterman when Paul McCain was on, or John McCain, not Paul McCain, John McCain, the senator. And their inside joke was mimicking McCain. They're saying he would shake hands with everybody. He didn't know who these guys were. And he'd go, "You're a fine American." I grew up in Arizona. I'm very well aware of who John McCain was. Did not like him. But,
Johnny knew of Jerry McCain. That's the only McCain, the blues man.
Yeah. Well,
he didn't know of John McCain, man. Yeah.
I got to hang with him a little bit in their motorhome, and Johnny signed a couple of albums for me that I have hanging here. But the big joke was, every time somebody paused, they say, "You're a fine American," and it was just they're just going back and forth on that. But Paul was so great.
Johnny's Texas to the core, man.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Listen, Johnny,
definitely.
Johnny doesn't get it. Johnny and Mike Bloomfield, both probably my two favorite guys. They never got that real acclaim that Page and Clapton and Beck got. And a lot of kids. When I say kids, I mean in their 50s. They really think the blues starts at Stevie Ray Vaughan. And they know that Stevie would have schooled them on that. Because Stevie would have said the blues starts with my brother and then it goes backwards from there.
Yep.
Jimmy Vaughan is a real blues man.
He is, and I've had the privilege of chatting with him several times and backstage with him. I was at Stevie Ray's funeral.
Yeah.
And I walked up, Jimmy, this is so cool. Walked up as Stevie Wonder, Jackson Browne, and Bonnie Raitt were singing Amazing Grace a cappella by the graveside. I'll never forget it. I wish we had smartphones then to been able to record it. That would have been so cool. But
well, you know what, though? That's your memory for you. You know what? And there's nothing wrong with that. We all have them. You and I both have them from going to shows in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
That, and by the way, everybody at those shows was present. I just did a thing the other night. We did a thing for Barry Goldberg at the Mint here. And, Barry passed away the day after Garth Hudson, two of my dear friends, great keyboard players and mentors to me. And I noticed the difference was, Barry's, because I had a bunch of players. I had Slash and Joe Bonamassa and Elliot Easton, and a lot of Richard Fortas was on there, and I had a lot of players that were newer blues players,
Hmm.
and some other ones like Carla Olson, who was from Austin,
I
and she
love
was
her. Love
Carla
her.
on it, and this is all like, and Marcy Levy rather, who of course,
Hmm.
was on wrote Lay Down Sally for Clapton, with Clapton,
Hmm.
and the core, she's on that.
Yeah.
And we all played together with Barry Goldberg. But I noticed that the younger people who came because Slash and Joe were there, they watched
Hmm.
the whole show like this,
Yeah. Yeah.
though rather like this, the whole show. I saw the light on, and the whole show they're
Hmm.
like this, and the older people were just like at watching the show, like we did, and committing it to memory.
Hmm.
And that's okay, but I wonder if they really experience the show, if they're thinking about the shot. So,
Yeah.
but what are you going to do? I mean, that's the way it goes. And
Yep.
but Johnny Winter again, I think about him all the time. I have to put a show together. I'm doing at the Blue Note in Maui in Hawaii. I'm doing a night there, a
How
night of
fun.
first wave, and I'm calling it because I have to have a theme there. I sneak some of my songs in, but basically I'm doing a show that's the first wave of blues rock pioneers, because it really it does start in the 60s with the Rolling Stones and Fleetwood Mac,
Hmm.
bringing it
Hmm.
over here, and because they were into Chicago blues. At the same time, though, what was happening here was Mike Bloomfield and Paul Butterfield. They were
Hmm.
blues rock pioneers too, along with Johnny Winter, and a bunch of other
Hmm.
people, Steve Miller, that were playing around. And the Texas guys were, Jimmy and Stevie. They were kids, but they were playing already too. They were
Yep.
already playing too. Texas is I say it's the second city of the blues. They said
That's a
because
good way of putting it. Yeah.
yeah, because Chicago is undoubtedly the first city of the
Yeah.
blues. No, as
Yep.
far as we know, what we know as Chicago blues. But Texas is the next place, And I
Yep.
know someone will say, "What about Memphis? What about?" Well, I'm talking about blues rock here, okay? Because Texas
Yeah.
brought us Johnny Winter and Billy Gibbons and Steve Miller,
Janis Joplin. Yep.
Janis Joplin, right? We're talking blues rock. So any of you real blues aficionados, yes, of course, we know Mississippi and Memphis and Helena, Arkansas. We know of the Triangle. We know of all of that. We know
Yep.
where it came from, but we don't. We do have to figure out what we're trying to talk about is blues rock here, and
Yeah.
that comes
Yeah.
balling out of Texas, big time, man. You know,
Big time.
big time. They just turned it up and let it loose, man. So and Chicago too. Like we said before
Yep.
about Buddy Guy turned it up.
Yep.
I
Yep.
saw him. It was
And then
Buddy.
of course, Chess Records had the fuel, that they made that possible for us
Well,
to
yeah,
be able to.
well, because they had Chuck and Bo too. Don't forget.
Yep.
You know,
I got to talk to
besides Muddy
Marshall.
and Wolf and all them, Sonny Boy
Oh
and all.
yeah. Yeah. Yep.
And
Man,
those
what a
guys were
legacy.
always trying to, Muddy and Wolf and Sonny Boy were always saying, how come Chuck Berry's getting all these hits, Well, the songs he's writing, he had his finger on the pulse of teenage America, white and black. It didn't
Hmm.
matter,
Hmm.
Those songs and that guitar style that he
Oh
got
yeah.
directly from T-Bone Walker, we know where it came from. But when the Rolling Stones picked up on it, and the Beatles and everybody else, and Fleetwood Mac and all those bands, John Mayall, they all picked up on Chicago blues,
Yep. Yep.
including Chuck Berry. So, and even people like Freddie King, though he was on King Records, was a Texas guy.
Yep. Yep.
Freddie King was a Texas guy. Texas is. And Tulsa, Oklahoma, too, was another town where shit was happening.
Yep.
So it's there's going to be somebody somewhere saying Jacksonville, Florida, the Allman Brothers were down there. Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
it eventually got there.
but
Yeah.
Plain Allman got. I mean, if you really want to know the truth, Plain Allman got his whole idea from Jesse Ed Davis to play slide when his arm was broken. And Greg gave him the Coricidin bottle, and he almost note for note took Statesboro Blues from a Tulsa Native American named Jesse Ed Davis. It's hard to trace the route. The route runs. I say it runs from probably from Mississippi, and then out across the country all the way to California. And in some places, there's some trees that that grew out of that route that are massive oaks like Freddie King and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Johnny Winter.
Oh, all of that.
And California had a whole scene that was amazing. South Central California, and then up in San Francisco and shit was happening.
Oh yeah. It's
Detroit, and John Lee Hooker up in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
There was stuff happening everywhere, and the least amount was happening in New York City because they were like rock and roll. They were doing doo-wop and R&B and stuff like that. We weren't hearing that much blues unless we heard it on some record collection. And that you had radio where you were from. They had blues music on the radio.
Yep. All the time. And that fueled me. And my mom's she gave me her 45s, which were Elvis, and to hear, oh God, my mind just went blank, but some of those early Elvis tunes were bluesy, and it just resonated with
all
me.
Heartbreak Hotel. That's Hoyt Axton,
and he's a Memphis boy,
Yeah.
Well, hey,
and they were bluesy, very bluesy records. Because when you think about, he was covering Arthur Crudup early on, and he was covering Little Junior Parker, Mystery Train, and he was covering Memphis stuff all the time, man, and blues and gospel. And when Lieber and Stoller were writing for him, even like with Jailhouse Rock, it was blues based. That was kind of like J.D. Loudermilk. That was kind of like Tobacco Road. It was like a take on J.D. Loudermilk. Tobacco Road. Yeah.
It all originates from the same point, I think, and that's just there's some knockoffs here and there, but it's all good in my opinion, and I love it all.